Hi, my name is Paul Friedman. I'm the founder of the Marriage Foundation. This topic is going to be part one, how to help my wife with her anger issues. And what I'm going to do here, by the way, where we're going to go with all this is to where your marriage is filled with love and joy. I know that may sound unusual. You're just looking for an answer to this, but you got married to experience happiness. And I say joy, but happiness. You found your soulmate, you fell in love, and you knew you'd be happier with her for the rest of your life, and it's not working out. So although this topic is really important, and you may even think that this is all of it, but it isn't. Your whole marriage should be producing happiness and love at levels that are just not even talked about these days. The term marital bliss is never used these days. And it's not a these days meaning that it used to be that way in the old days. It means that people don't know how to be married. So we're going to go there. But we're going to begin in this first part of how to help my wife with anger issues. We're going to talk about what anger actually is and why it exists, and then what you can do about it. So, anger is primal. You know that. It is a part of the drive to survive. We know, it's scientific, that every cell, every living thing has within it innately this self-preservation aspect. In fact, it's how we know something is alive. It wants to remain alive, also wants to reproduce. So that carries with it a number of manifestations. In a human being, which is what you are and I am, we're human beings, we have a mind. We possess it. We're not our mind. We possess it. We'll get into that later. We also possess the body. The body is comprised of trillions of cells, all of which have within it this innate drive to survive. Well, so what? So because we also have a mind, the body is communicating with the mind constantly. The mind regulates the body, doesn't it? Regulates the oxygen intake, assimilation, elimination, all of the behind the scenes management of the body is run by the mind. But the mind is picking up messages from the body continuously, information, so it can do so. Unfortunately, because of this drive to survive, there are other aspects of managing the body that come into play that are outside of the realm of just normal regulation. For instance, if it gets too cold, then the body is sending a message to the mind, it's too cold, and if it gets really cold, we're going to die. And so what the mind does is it says we need to get where it's warm or put on appropriate clothing, right? So this is what the drive to survive does. It also does things that is more primal. For instance, if there is danger, what happens is the mind has a function where it shuts everything down except defense against the danger. This is what we call anger. Anger manifests in the mind as put everything else aside, we have to deal with this danger. And let's deal with it by aggressively refuting it, pushing back. It's primal. It isn't thinking. It is automatic. We respectfully call it instinctive. And that's what anger is. Now, there are ways we can prove that. When you go up on a mountaintop or you go to a cliff overlooking the ocean and you feel peace. Why? It's because through the eyes we can see no danger. We could see if danger is going to come. And then we get to think we don't have to react, because anger is reactive. It's an instantaneous kind of thing that is there for self-protection. Now, you have anger by letting it in. Your wife has anger by letting it in. But your wife's anger is starting to trigger you, and it's coming through to you in terms of annoyance, irritation, frustration, responsive anger, the same thing. All of it's the same thing. We don't know what is triggering your wife's anger. So she doesn't have anger issues. I hate that term. And by the way, I'm very familiar with anger because before I was doing this, I was a divorce mediator. This is in the early 2000s, so trust me, I have seen anger. Also, personally, in 1990s, I decided I would get rid of my own anger. Couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Now, I was able to stop it before it became a huge problem for other people, as your wife's anger is a huge problem for you, but I wasn't able to. Not until I started doing this, and I needed to help couples, and I'm just telling you what happened here. Don't take this any other way other than information. But the couples I was working with also had anger issues. At that time, I didn't understand anger the way I later came to understand it. And so I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. I'm a meditator. And so I always tune in to my Creator, to God, to get answers to problems that I don't have an answer to. And I was given this technique that with it, I was able to completely eliminate anger from myself. Now, that I'll talk about later because it's a what to do so that you can have the ultimate marriage. But in your wife's case, and here is the problem, and I'm going to get into it in part 2. There's nothing you can do about your wife's anger, but there are things that you can do. And we're going to get into that in part 2 of this. So again, I'm Paul Friedman, founded the Marriage Foundation, and start watching part 2. Now you should understand where anger comes from. You should recognize it as, okay, there it is. Now what do we do with it? And you should also recognize it as not a part of her, but something that she allows into her consciousness. Just as when you experience anger, it's the same thing. So let's go to part 2, shall we?